This baby is a repeat offender," my son Cody suddenly said to my niece Misty. I was stunned, as were my parents and my brother William. My mother Sabrina held 3-month-old Misty, who smiled at my father Kevin.
"Hey, Cody! What are you talking about all of a sudden?"
I hurried to apologize to William, but my husband Mike grabbed my shoulder to stop me. Mike, shaking, approached Misty and looked at her face.
"Mike! What's wrong?"
At that moment, Mike began trembling violently and started hyperventilating. I tried to calm him by rubbing his back, but he wouldn't settle down. We rushed to the hospital in a panic. By the time Mike was seen by the doctors, he had calmed down a bit, but they advised us to let him rest a little before going home and led him to a treatment room. Leaving Mike in the care of William and my parents, I took Cody to a quiet place. We sat on a bench outside the hospital.
"Cody, do you know what a repeat offender means?"
Yeah, it's someone who has done something bad before. He seemed to understand the meaning. But the person in question was a 3-month-old baby. There's no way she could have a criminal record.
"What makes you think Misty is a repeat offender?"
No, you got it wrong. Even though I was confirming what Cody had said, he denied it. Cody's words deepened my confusion. The baby is being held by a bad person. My name is Ashley. Mike and I are the same age. I met Mike during my job hunting period. I was standing on a bus, feeling faint and unsure what to do when Mike spoke to me. Mike asked people around us for a seat and helped me sit down. I later got his contact information to thank him, and we met again and again, growing closer each time. Even after I became a civil servant and Mike became a lawyer, our relationship continued. When I finally asked him out, Mike told me why he knew I was feeling faint when we first met. Mike said he had a strange ability since he was a child. It wasn't exactly seeing ghosts, it was more like seeing people's auras. He explained that auras show a person's condition, including their health. He noticed my aura was a dark blue, indicating I wasn't feeling well. I might cause you trouble with this ability, Ashley. That's not true. Mike, your ability has helped me. I'm proud of your power. Mike smiled and thanked me, accepting my sincere words. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and on our first anniversary of dating, Mike proposed to me. Of course, I accepted. When I introduced Mike to my parents and William, I honestly talked about his mysterious power. They accepted it without any discomfort, and my in-laws were kind to me as well, allowing us to build a good relationship. A year after our marriage, I gave birth to Cody. Thanks to Mike's power, we could quickly address any of Cody's health issues. Mike was very supportive with both parenting and housework, so our life went smoothly. What color do newborn babies have? I asked while holding the sleeping Cody. Babies don't have their own color yet. Do you mean they're transparent? Mike shook his head. They show half of each parent's color. I can see both your color and mine in Cody. Mike smiled happily. Apparently, once babies develop their own identity, this mixed color disappears. This was the first time I felt envious of Mike's ability. For years after I got married, William contacted me to announce his engagement and ask us to attend his wedding. He wanted us to come as a family, so Mike and Cody were going to attend with me. On the day of the wedding, while moving from the ceremony hall to the reception venue, Mike looked at one of the bride's relatives and spoke to me. That person seems unwell. Can you see it? Yes, a dark blue color. She might be feeling faint. The person Mike pointed out was an elderly woman. Though the ceremony and reception venues were within the same premises and not far apart, it would be best not to strain her if she was unwell. Let's go talk to her. Okay. Holding Cody, I approached the elderly woman. Mike spoke to the elderly woman. "Excuse me, you don't look well. Shall I call a staff member for you?"
Oh, I'm sorry. My vision has become a little blurry.
Mike quickly called for a staff member, and they took the elderly woman to the medical room. Fortunately, it turned out to be a mild case of anemia, and she was able to join the reception midway through. During the reception, the elderly woman came over to our table to thank Mike personally. William and Nicole seemed puzzled by the scene. After the ceremony, when the family gathered, they asked why the bride's relative had thanked Mike. I didn't see any reason to hide it, so I explained that Mike had helped her because she seemed unwell. Nicole seemed genuinely curious about how Mike had noticed she was unwell. While it might be easier to notice when someone close by is unwell, it's harder to tell with a relative of the bride who is a stranger. Even the staff hadn't noticed until Mike pointed it out. While I was trying to find the right words to explain, William blurted out,
Mike is amazing. He can see people's auras with his special ability. Auras?
Nicole looked puzzled. Brian, my father-in-law, overheard the conversation.
Yeah, he can see auras in color, and when someone's health deteriorates, the aura color changes. That's how he knew. Right, Mike?
Yes, that's right. I was aware of William's lack of tact, but I never expected him to reveal Mike's secret so easily. I'd have to talk to William about this later. Wow, that's impressive. Nicole's reaction was somewhat awkward. While my family accepted Mike's ability, it might be difficult for others to do so. I didn't think Nicole's reaction was cold. But then, Nicole's father, Brian, sneered. "What is that?" "That's creepy." Brian's words froze the atmosphere. Nicole remained silent and didn't admonish her father. "Auras? Colors? What are you talking about? Trying to stand out with this weird ability because you're a dull, unmanly guy?"
That's not what I...
Brian stepped closer to Mike. Mike, being the kind person he is, tends to remain silent when insulted. If this continued, Mike wouldn't defend himself and would suppress his feelings. It wasn't fair. Mike had helped someone. So why was he being treated like this? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I quietly handed Cody over to my parents and approached Mike. Having someone like this in the family is an embarrassment to Nicole. Apologize.
You should be the one to apologize. We have no reason to be spoken to like this, especially when we were being thanked.
I stood in front of Mike, facing Brian. Brian glared at me.
Women should stay out of this. Don't you realize that your outburst is what's embarrassing on such an important day? What did you say? Everyone, calm down.
William's shout drew the attention of the staff, who quickly intervened and diffused the situation. Later, I apologized to William and Nicole. Even though the ceremony was over, it must have been terrible for them to remember the day with such a scene while still in their wedding attire. "I'm sorry for what happened on your special day. No, I was too hasty. I should apologize to Mike." I wanted to tell William to be more careful in the future, but held back.
You shouldn't have said anything strange.
Nicole was angry at William, probably avoiding saying it directly to me. Honestly, I felt there should have been some comment about Brian's behavior. I was still not satisfied and held on to some resentment, but I decided to limit my contact with William to avoid further issues. A few years after the wedding, when Cody was about 5 years old, he started seeing things I couldn't. When I asked what he saw, he said he could tell good people from bad people. It seemed he had a similar ability to Mike's. During a family trip, Cody pointed out a man at a tourist spot. That man is bad. As soon as Cody said that, Mike and I kept an eye on the man, who then committed theft. I immediately called the police, and Mike detained the man. It was the day we realized Cody's ability was genuine. We taught Cody to stay away from people with bad auras and not to tell anyone except Mike and me. Cody agreed and has been living without any problems. When Cody was about 10, William told me that Nicole was pregnant. Later, she safely gave birth to a baby girl. When things settled down, we arranged to visit them when the baby was 3 months old. On the day of the visit, Nicole had some business at her parents' place and wasn't home. I assumed she didn't want to see me. Since that wedding, I've hardly seen Nicole. Nicole might think of me as the horrible person who yelled at her father. But she might also just want a break from the baby sometimes. When we arrived at William's house, my parents immediately ran over to Misty.
She's adorable. I forgot how small babies are. Hey, she smiled.
My parents were completely enchanted by their granddaughter. I was eager to meet Misty too. I walked over to hold Misty. Then it happened. This baby is a repeat offender. Cody suddenly blurted out to Misty. My parents, William, and I were stunned. My mother was holding the 3-month-old baby who was smiling at my father.
Cody, what are you saying?
I was about to apologize to William when Mike grabbed my shoulder to stop me. Mike approached Misty, trembling, and looked at her face.
Mike! What's wrong?
At that moment, Mike started shaking violently and had trouble breathing. I supported Mike as he collapsed, trying to calm him by rubbing his back, but he wouldn't settle down. In a panic, we rushed to the hospital. By the time we got Mike checked out, he had calmed down a bit, but the doctors advised us to let him rest for a while in the treatment room. Leaving Mike in the care of William and my parents in the treatment room, I took Cody outside to a quiet spot. We sat on a bench outside the hospital.
Cody, do you know what a repeat offender means?
Yeah, it's someone who's done something bad before. He seemed to understand the term. But Misty was just a 3-month-old baby. There's no way she could have a criminal record.
What makes you think Misty is a repeat offender?
No, you got it wrong. Even though I was trying to clarify what Cody meant, he denied it. What Cody said deepened my curiosity. The baby is being held by a bad person.
What?
A bad person. Cody uses that term when he sees an aura that I can't see. Cody only uses the term bad person when it's just me and Mike around.
Not Grandpa and Grandma, right?
The people next to Misty were my parents. I had to make sure, even though I was pretty sure it wasn't them. Cody shook his head. It seemed even Cody couldn't pinpoint whose aura it was. Mike probably knew. I decided to wait until Mike was calm to talk to him. When I returned to the hospital room, Mike seemed composed. In front of everyone, Mike began to explain slowly. I can see Nicole's aura around Misty, but I don't see William's color at all. Instead, there's a very eerie color. I think that's the bad person Cody is talking about. Mike had told me something similar when Cody was born. Newborn babies are supposed to reflect their parents' auras. It made sense for Nicole's aura to be visible since she gave birth to Misty. But why wasn't William's color there? And what did it mean that there was a bad person aura? Mike seemed to have an idea, but as a lawyer, he was careful not to jump to conclusions. My parents and William were as confused as I was. But based on what Cody and Mike were saying, it was clear Nicole had something to hide. We needed to investigate. Is it okay if we look into Nicole? I asked William. Even though it was really an issue between him and Nicole. We couldn't just take matters into our own hands. Yes. If my color isn't there, I trust you too. By you too, he meant Cody and Mike. Mike seemed relieved by William's words. After a month of investigating, we arranged to meet Nicole at William's house. Cody and Misty were with my parents. Hello. Long time no see. Long time no see. Nicole was clearly not pleased to see us. We hadn't met since I apologized after the wedding. Nicole had been avoiding Mike and I. She cared about appearances and, while not as much as Brian, she found Mike's abilities unsettling. Timid William watched our exchange from the kitchen. What do you want? I have plans to go out. We need to talk about your affair. Nicole's hand, which had been fidgeting with her hair, stopped. Not wanting to hear her denials, I spread all the documents and photos across the table. They were from the investigation into her affair. Nicole was visibly shaken.
What are those? Fake documents?
She was still trying to play dumb. Look at this.
This photo shows you entering a hotel with your lover.
You came out 3 hours later. I held up a photo where Nicole's face was clearly visible.
No, that's not true. It's not true.
Nicole's response was weak and unconvincing.
That man is a friend. His wife was having an affair at that hotel, and he asked me to come along to confirm it. We had to act natural so the hotel staff wouldn't get suspicious.
Right. I almost called out her flimsy excuse, but held back.
These documents here summarize the payment history at the hotel and the messages exchanged between you and your lover. What is this? You paid for the hotel with a credit card in William's name. By tracing the credit card history, we can see when and where you paid for the hotel.
To verify any suspicious activity, I had William print out the credit card statements, and sure enough, Nicole had used William's card for her hotel stays with her lover. Nicole hadn't expected her credit card history to be checked and was clearly upset.
What? Did William do this?
No.
William just gave me the credit card statements. Creepy. Like a stalker.
The payment history showed frequent use of the same hotel. The messages were filled with hearts and made it clear they were more than just friends. Nicole was breaking into a cold sweat. Gripping the paper with the message exchanges, Nicole was trembling.
What is this? This is fake. It's not me.
At that moment, the doorbell rang. Nicole, looking to escape, headed for the door. Hiding my smile, I followed her.
Mike?
Nicole opened the door to find Mike standing there.
Hello. Ashley's here, right? Yes. What?
Nicole seemed surprised, but then noticed the person standing behind Mike. Nicole turned pale. Mike had brought Nicole's lover, Jason.
Let's go back to the living room. The conversation is just getting started.
At my words, Nicole silently returned to the living room. As we investigated Nicole's actions, the affair quickly became evident. From there, William and I focused on gathering evidence of the affair, while Mike investigated Jason's background and met him directly. Jason worked for the same company as Brian. Jason, expecting only to be confronted about the affair, seemed somewhat confident. Mike pulled out a document from his bag. It was a DNA test result.
This proves that William is not Misty's father and that Jason is.
Nicole trembled with rage as she was shown the document. Mike, having joined us in the living room, sighed as he reviewed the test results. Nicole shouted at Mike.
This is illegal. You can't conduct a DNA test without the mother's consent. This is a parentage test. It only concerns the father and the child. The mother's consent is not required.
Mike responded calmly to Nicole's accusation. Nicole's anger turned towards Jason.
Why did you agree to the test? Are you stupid?
I was curious about whose child it was, too. As Jason's carefree attitude showed, Mike presented another piece of evidence.
It appears you have been embezzling money from your company. What?
Mike handed Jason another document. Jason's hands trembled, a stark contrast to his earlier demeanor. As Mike delved into Jason's background, he noticed Jason's frequent nightlife activities. Given Jason's position and salary at the company, Mike suspected that his income wouldn't cover such a lifestyle. Mike, intrigued by Cody's mention of a criminal, also investigated Jason's behavior. While collecting evidence of the affair took less than a month, proving Jason's wrongdoing required more time. Ultimately, the evidence revealed Jason's embezzlement.
We will report your embezzlement to your company, not just your affair. Wait, please, wait.
Jason slowly knelt down, pleading.
Please forgive me. I'll prepare any amount of compensation. Just don't report this to the company.
Jason admitted to the embezzlement. Nicole was bewildered by his behavior.
Embezzlement? What are you talking about? Are you stupid? I don't know anything about it. Don't drag me into this.
You're right. You didn't know about the embezzlement, so that's a separate issue.
But you did have an affair with this man, didn't you?
At my words, Nicole looked at William. She might have been seeking his help. William averted his gaze from Nicole. I'm sorry. Nicole apologized to William, just as Jason had. She then desperately started to explain her reasons for the affair. Nicole said she felt stressed because she and William had trouble conceiving a child. She envied me, with a child almost 10 years old, wanting to be a young mom herself but struggling to get pregnant. That's what Nicole said. Perhaps Nicole's bad attitude towards me and avoiding me wasn't just because of the incident at the wedding, but also due to her frustration over not having children. One day, while delivering something Brian had forgotten to his company, she met Jason, and they became lovers from there. Nicole said she only wanted a child, and that she still loved William. When she got pregnant, she believed it was William's child. But William wasn't listening anymore.
If that was the case, why did you continue your relationship even after the child was born?
Nicole was at a loss for words.
We will report your affair and the embezzlement to your company. The company will likely involve the police.
At my words, Jason lifted his head. William then addressed Nicole.
I will also divorce you and seek damages.
Nicole and her lover were devastated. If we left William alone in this house, Nicole might try to win him back by crying. Thinking this, we took William to our parents' house. At our parents' house, Mike and William discussed the future, including financial and safety matters. Once they settled the details, William took action. First, William divorced Nicole and sought damages. Regarding the child's custody, William, though not the biological father, decided to take custody, believing the child would be unhappy with Nicole. He also sought child support. Initially, both Nicole and Jason resisted, but with Mike's help as a lawyer, the matter was resolved smoothly. Nicole, naturally, sought help from her parents, but they were furious at losing their grandchild and cut ties with her, throwing her out of their home. One day, while I was visiting, Nicole's parents called William directly to inform him of this. The caller was Nicole's father. William put the phone on speaker so I could hear as well.
Our daughter did something foolish. But as an adult, she is responsible for her actions, not us. We still want to see our grandchild in the future.
Their selfish attitude irritated me as usual. William responded while keeping the speaker on.
What Nicole did is not your responsibility. Good. I'm glad you understand. But I haven't forgiven you either. What?
Nicole's father sounded dumbfounded at William's words. I was surprised too, but William was smiling.
You insulted my family. What are you talking about? On the wedding day, you were rude to Mike and said disrespectful things to Ashley.
I was stunned. William remembered the feelings I had been harboring since that day, and was now standing up for us.
I have no obligation to care about your feelings. Just like Nicole, you are now a stranger to me.
William hung up the phone and immediately blocked the number. We both couldn't help but laugh at the situation. Did you really remember that day?
Of course. Maybe I should have said even more.
Thank you. The resentment I had been holding on to since the wedding day finally dissipated. Nicole's father lost both his daughter and his grandchild. Nicole, in an attempt to save face, paid the compensation in one lump sum by taking out a loan. However, with monthly child support payments, she struggled to find a job, her debt continued to grow, and she ended up living in extreme poverty. Jason was arrested for embezzling company funds and is currently being sued by the company. Given that the company was quite well known, the case was even covered on TV. The affair partner became infamous in a negative way. Losing his job and assets, it seems he will lead a life where finding employment after his release will be difficult, and no one will help him. When the distribution of property was decided during the divorce, William feared that Nicole and her parents might show up unannounced, so he put the house they had lived in as a couple up for sale. Now, he lives in a condo near our parents' house. William was always cooperative in raising Nicole, but now he is struggling to raise Misty on his own. However, with the support of our parents, he is managing to balance work and childcare. Our parents still adore Misty as much as they did when they first met her, and after picking her up from the childcare center, they bathe her and take care of her at their home until William comes back from work. A few times a month, Mike, Cody, and I visit William and Misty together. Cody also adores Misty, and they look like real siblings. Seeing them like this brings a smile to both William and I. Surprise! My mom is coming with us. My husband, Robert's elated voice echoed through the entryway. As I watched him and his mother Stephanie's excitement, I couldn't hide my shock. Of course I couldn't. After all, he had just announced that his mother would be joining us on our honeymoon. I was at a loss, unable to comprehend what Robert was saying. He pouted, clearly dissatisfied.
What's the matter? Aren't you happy?
Happy? Not a chance. He should have known. I had complained to him countless times about my terrible relationship with his mother. She couldn't forgive me for stealing her precious son away from her. Every time we met, she would barrage me with snide remarks. The real issue was that she never showed this side of herself in front of him. She played the role of the perfect Maëlle. Because of this, no matter how much I confided in Robert about her harassment, he never quite believed me. Still, he should have been well aware that I found her presence uncomfortable. Despite all of this, he had planned something like this. What on earth was he thinking?
Wait a minute, the trip is today. There's no way we can get a plane ticket and hotel room for her now.
Naturally, I hadn't made any reservations for Stephanie. It was the middle of the busy travel season. The nerve of her, trying to tag along without any prior arrangements. When I explained this to Robert, he countered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world.
Then hand over all of your tickets. I'll just go with my mom then.
I was speechless as he held out his hand expectantly. What was going through his head? This wasn't just any trip. It was our honeymoon. Who in their right mind would bring their mother on their honeymoon? Not that I would want to travel with his mother under any circumstances. Seeing my apparent shock, Stephanie flashed a triumphant smile. She must have been so proud that Robert had prioritized her.
Come on, hurry up. I paid for the trip, so it shouldn't matter.
Robert insisted. Did he really think that paying for the trip gave him the right to do whatever he pleased? As I pondered this, a sudden realization hit me. Speaking of the cost of this trip. My name is Ashley, and I'm 28 years old. I work at the company my father, Nicholas, runs. When I first started, people said all sorts of things, like I only got the job because of my dad. But as I worked hard and delivered results, I was grateful to hear more and more people appreciating me for my own merits. Still, there are always those who whisper behind my back, just because I'm the CEO's daughter. Sometimes their heartless words hurt. That's when Robert was there to support me. Robert is the same age as me, and we were assigned to the same team. Being colleagues, he was always there to lend an ear when I needed advice. It didn't take long for us to start dating, or so it seemed to me. Robert was skilled at his job and made significant contributions to the company's performance. My father approved of him, and when we announced our engagement, he gave us his wholehearted blessing.
So you're Robert. I've heard about you. Please take good care of Ashley.
My father said. Yes, sir. I'll make Ashley happy, I promise. Robert replied. At the time, I remember watching this exchange between my father and Robert, feeling dazzled. Around then, my father was considering who he might entrust the company to, and had been consulting with other executives. There were rumors that Robert might be the next CEO, and people were talking him up. Just as my father was contemplating a generational shift for the company he had founded, along came his daughter's wedding, out of the blue. He could have handed over management to someone outside the family, but if his daughter's husband turned out to be a capable businessman, surely my father wouldn't object. I was never one to put myself forward, so nothing could be better than having my go-getter daughter's husband take over the company. I imagine that's the way he saw it. My father never said anything to Robert or me directly, but whenever we had dinner together, he would often talk about the mindset needed to run a company. So both Robert and I figured that's the way things would go, sooner or later. His father had already passed away, and his mother, Stephanie, was living alone. Robert cherished his mother deeply. Even when we were dating, if Stephanie called needing help while we were out, he would rush to her side. He would apologize, saying he wanted to repay her for raising him as a single mother, and I would send him off with a smile. What a wonderful man he was, to care for his mother so much. I even felt proud to be dating someone like him. But after we got married and started living together, I began to have second thoughts.
I'm just going to check on Mom for a bit,
became Robert's constant refrain, as he visited his mother every week. Stephanie, is she not feeling well? I would ask, concerned. But that was never the case.
Don't worry about it, Ashley. You need time to yourself too, right?
He would say, patting me on the head. At first, anyway. Lately, he doesn't even do that anymore. One Saturday morning, as Robert hummed and got ready to go out, I asked him, "Hey, are you going to her house again today?" I asked. Robert, who had been in high spirits until then, stopped what he was doing and let out a deep sigh.
Ugh, what's with that tone?
He grumbled. I shrugged at his words. Damn, I accidentally used an accusing tone. I realized it too late. Robert turned around and glared at me.
What do you expect? Mom is all alone at home. I'm going to check on her because you said you don't like it. Do you understand?
He snapped. I flinched at his response. It was true. I wasn't fond of her. Of course, it wasn't always like that. Stephanie, the woman who gave birth to my beloved Robert. I had initially thought that I would cherish Stephanie just as much as he did. However, there was no guarantee that the other person would reciprocate those feelings. Stephanie saw me as a stranger who had stolen her son away. Ever since we met, she had been constantly making snide remarks whenever Robert wasn't around. It started the first time I went to meet her. As soon as Robert excused himself to the restroom and his footsteps faded, her demeanor changed. Her once pleasant expression transformed into a scrutinizing gaze, as if appraising me from head to toe.
So you're the CEO's daughter or whatever.
Nothing special, if you ask me. She scoffed. Before I could even react to Stephanie's sudden change, she continued with a tone dripping with sarcasm.
The nerve of you, coming here after stealing Robert from me.
Just so you know, I don't approve of you.
Don't get the wrong idea.
She sneered. Laughing at my dumbfounded expression, she slurped her coffee loudly. Of course, no coffee had been offered to me.
Stephanie.
I began.
Don't address me so casually. It's creepy.
She snapped. Why did I have to endure such hostility from someone I'd just met? Even as I tried my best to engage with her, Stephanie immediately shut me down. As I sat there, bewildered by her utter disregard, I heard Robert's footsteps returning from the restroom. And just like that, Stephanie's demeanor changed once again. She plastered on a pleasant smile and offered me coffee as if she had just remembered.
Oh my, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot to serve you coffee.
She cooed. Stephanie let out a light-hearted laugh, and Robert, who had just returned, gave a wry smile.
What's this, Mom? You hadn't served the coffee yet?
He asked.
She's a lovely person, Robert. I completely forgot to pour the coffee.
Stephanie replied, putting on a kind-looking smile.
Ashley, I'd be delighted if you felt comfortable calling me Stephanie.
She added. I felt a chill run down my spine. Ever since then, Stephanie had been constantly making snide remarks to me whenever Robert wasn't around. It was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Robert was surely unaware of the malice that Stephanie showed only to me. Even when I couldn't take it anymore and confided in Robert, he would simply say that his mother would never say such things.
If you dislike it that much, you don't have to see her,
he told me. My words were not believed at all, and Robert's face fell in disappointment. At first, I had tried my best to make my case. But no matter what I said, Robert always took Stephanie's side, and I gave up trying to clear up the misunderstanding. So, I decided to take Robert at his word and avoid seeing her unless absolutely necessary. From Robert's perspective, I must have seemed like I simply despised his precious mother.
Well, make sure you lock up properly,
he said, heading off to Stephanie's place without looking back at me. Wait, I called out, my hand grasping at the air. Tears blurred my vision of Robert's retreating back. On days when we fought about Stephanie, Robert wouldn't come home. It felt like I was being made to realize that his mother was more important to him than his wife. If it weren't for Stephanie, Robert would have been a good husband. He was quick to notice when I was having a hard time at work and would support me. Even though he worked more overtime than I did, he would still help out with the housework. Maybe it's not so bad, since he says I don't have to see her, I mumbled to myself as I flipped through a travel brochure. I shook my head and tried to focus on the plan in front of me. It was for our long-awaited honeymoon. At least during this trip, I wouldn't have to think about Stephanie. Robert wouldn't be called away to rush to her side. As I incorporated Robert's requests, Since he had been working more overtime after joining a big project team, I let my imagination wander to where we might go. Maybe we could splurge and really indulge ourselves, just this once. The temptation crossed my mind as I turned the pages, but I quickly pushed the thought aside.
Since I've left all the preparations to you, at least let me pay for it from my bank account.
I remembered how Robert had said that with a smile, not even listening when I insisted that I should pay too, since it was our honeymoon. If we were both paying, that would be one thing, but if Robert was shouldering the burden alone, it wouldn't be right to spend too much money. Besides, I didn't want to give Stephanie any ammunition for her snide remarks, like saying that as the CEO's daughter, I was careless with money. Thinking about all that, I let out a wry chuckle to myself. Just a moment ago, I had resolved to focus, but here I was thinking about her again.
Ugh! I'll stop thinking about her.
Trying to change my mood, I set down the brochure and started preparing dinner for Robert, who would be coming home soon. And then, the morning of our honeymoon arrived. As I was hurriedly getting ready, the doorbell rang. Coming. Since I was already by the entrance, I opened the door without checking who it was, and I was shocked.
Stephanie!
There stood Stephanie in flashy clothes, holding a large suitcase. Perhaps hearing my voice, Robert poked his head out.
You're early, Mom.
I looked back and forth between Robert, who was cheerfully welcoming her, and Stephanie, who was ignoring me, feeling completely baffled.
Early? What do you mean?
We were supposed to be leaving for our honeymoon, so what was with her huge luggage? Was she planning to stay at our place while we were away on our trip? As I stood there, perplexed, Robert turned to me with a smile that closely resembled Stephanie's.
Surprise! My mom's coming with us. Huh?
I was so taken aback by Robert's solo applause that I let out a stupid-sounding response. What on earth was Robert talking about?
Wait a minute, what do you mean? I told you, Mom's coming with us on our honeymoon.
Robert pursed his lips as he said this to me, unable to hide my confusion, and happily put his arm around Stephanie's shoulder.
I thought it would be nice if Mom could join us, since we're going on a trip and all.
Seeing Robert's delight, Stephanie shot me a smug look. No, 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 no. Hold on a second. I held my throbbing head and politely asked again.
It's our honeymoon, right? Aren't honeymoons supposed to be for the married couple? If you wanted to invite an important family member, shouldn't you have at least discussed it with me first?
Am I wrong? I'm not wrong, am I? So why are you looking at me like my words are strange? It's as if my words aren't getting through, and I'm starting to doubt Robert. To make matters worse, she seems so pleased to see me suffering that she starts humming. Why do we have to have this argument on what should be a joyful day, the start of our honeymoon? And what's with this surprise on the day of the trip?
What's the big deal? I paid for it, so it's fine.
Robert retorted, noticing my astonishment and looking angry. No, it's not fine. Could it be that when you said you'd pay for the trip, it wasn't to give me a break, but to keep me from complaining about you bringing your mom along? Wait a minute, even if you tell me suddenly, there's no way we can make that work. As I sighed in exasperation, Robert and Stephanie began to openly show their displeasure.
What do you mean, no way?
Oh no, she doesn't want to travel with me. Stephanie whined, deliberately sounding troubled. Robert argued back like a child, and Stephanie let out an intentionally distressed voice. My head started to ache more and more.
It's not a question of wanting to or not. Robert, what about Stephanie's plane ticket? Did you book a hotel for her?
When I asked that, Robert gave me a flippant look.
Huh? We can just book it now, can't we? There's no way that's possible. How many months in advance do you think we made these reservations?
I couldn't help but raise my voice at his utter lack of planning. Did he really think we could just wing it on the day of? Even though I had tried not to splurge, the hotel I booked was still quite nice. Not to mention, it was now the peak travel season during a major holiday.
There's no way there are any vacancies on flights or in hotels.
As I pressed him, Robert held out his hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world.
Then hand over all your tickets. What?
For a moment, I didn't understand what he was saying, so I asked him to repeat himself. Robert replied irritably.
I said, if there's no ticket for Mom, then give me yours. That's an order from the one who paid for this trip.
Looking at his mother's triumphant face, my vision went dark. What? What do you mean? What are you telling me to do?
Since Mom went to all the trouble of getting ready, I'll go on this trip with just her. I'll take you on a separate trip some other time, Ashley, so it's fine.
I couldn't keep up with Robert's reasoning, prioritizing his mother as if it were as natural as breathing. Or does he think it's not a problem if he goes on a trip separately from me? I'll say it again, this trip is our honeymoon. Mine and Robert's. Who in their right mind would agree to suddenly give it up to Stephanie, who showed up out of nowhere, surprise or not? Mom went to all the trouble of getting ready? I know nothing about that. If anyone should go home to smooth things over, it should be her. Not me. And yet, I was utterly astounded by Robert telling me to give up instead. Actually, I was going to keep quiet about this, but... I sighed deeply, holding my aching head.
My dad is paying for this trip. You haven't paid anything, so you have no right to demand my tickets.
When I told him that, this time it was his turn to look bewildered. Well, of course. He had thought he was the one who paid, which is why he could be so forceful.
Why would your dad do that?
I gave Robert, who was starting to break out in a cold sweat, a chilly look. He gave it to us as a gift, telling us to save the honeymoon money for our future. And he had even told me to keep quiet about it because Robert would have his pride.
Why didn't you tell me?
Robert's face turned bright red at the shocking truth, and he started yelling. Stephanie, who had been so smug until then, also began to look flustered, probably never imagining that my father was footing the bill. Watching Robert throw a fit, I felt my feelings rapidly cooling. I was fed up with both her snide remarks that I had endured and Robert's unwavering priority of her. If you two are going, I'll have to return the money to my father and cancel the reservations. Go on your own dime. I brushed off Robert and Stephanie's hands as they frantically tried to stop me, grabbed my packed bags, and left the house. This was no joke. I wouldn't allow my father's money to be used for those people, no matter who permitted it. Since Robert had pushed the planning onto me, saying he was busy, all the flights and hotels were booked under my name. I immediately started contacting each place to cancel as I got into the taxi I had called. I gave the taxi driver my parents' address instead of the planned airport, and though confused, he drove off. My father's eyes nearly popped out of his head in surprise when his daughter, who was supposed to be leaving for her honeymoon, showed up with a pile of luggage. However, when he heard the whole story from me, he erupted in anger like a raging fire.
What is the meaning of this? Are they out of their minds?
The incessant incoming calls from Robert only fueled my father's anger further. Of course, it fueled my own anger as well. Talking to my father solidified my resolve. Dad, I'm thinking of getting a divorce. When I told him clearly, my father quieted his anger and gently stood by my side. Without saying whether it was good or bad, he softly stroked my back, his hand warm. I'm sorry, Dad. The words spilled out with my tears, and I could see my father's other hand, not on my back, clenching tightly. The next day, Robert came to my parents' house to apologize. As I tried to turn him away at the door, my father stopped me.
If you're getting a divorce, you'll need to have a discussion. I want to hear his true intentions directly from him. Let him in, just this once.
I had been planning to hire a lawyer, but if my father said so, I would let Robert in. When I opened the door, Robert quickly changed his attitude upon noticing my father. It was infuriating to see Robert acting meek just because my father was there. As I sighed at his constant groveling, my father prompted me to show him to the guest room.
Sir, I am deeply sorry for causing such a disturbance.
Wasting no time on greetings, Robert began apologizing profusely, rubbing his head against the guest room table. Robert sometimes called my father sir like this, even in private. He had laughed it off, saying it was a habit, but seeing it now, I couldn't help but feel that when Robert called him sir instead of his name, he was treating my father as a business relation. He must have been used to it at work too. His flawless apologetic demeanor was so polished it made me want to vomit.
Just what are you apologizing for?
My father let out a sigh, for who knows how many times. I felt the same way. Robert had said he was sorry for causing a disturbance. Causing a disturbance, huh? He wasn't apologizing at all for what he had done to me. There was a limit to how much I could be insulted. I cut off him as he frantically tried to say something and held out a piece of paper.
The divorce papers. Do you know how to fill them out? I've already done my part, so feel free to use it as a reference.
I told him this deliberately politely. His face turned pale as he looked at the divorce papers, clearly not expecting them.
Wait, Ashley, what do you mean, divorce?
I think this was the first time he had properly looked at my face since coming to my parents' house. I wasn't that important to him.
It shouldn't be a problem, right? You have your beloved mom, after all.
If that was Robert's intention, I would speak to him politely, like a business partner. I had no intention of repairing our relationship. I had to make that clear with my attitude.
What are you talking about? Why are you bringing up my mom here? She was looking forward to that trip too. We can go anytime with you, right?
I was astonished. Robert didn't understand a single reason why I had left in anger.
What do you mean, we can go anytime? It was our honeymoon, remember?
I gently pressed my trembling body with my right hand at the sheer awfulness of it all. My tightly pressed lips hurt.
In what world does a husband try to go on his wife's planned honeymoon with his own mother?
Putting it into words made it all the more pathetic. But Robert retorted as if rubbing salt in the wound.
That's why I was trying to bring you along at first. Weren't you the one who said there were no flights or hotel rooms available for Mom, Ashley? Use some common sense. Of course there wouldn't be any available if you tell me on the day of.
I couldn't believe it. He was seriously saying this. He was yelling, truly believing it was my fault, with a mix of confusion and anger on his face.
So you're telling Mom to go home? She was looking forward to it so much.
My father quietly stopped Robert, who looked like he was about to lunge at me.
That's enough. Stop it now.
My father, who had been listening silently until then, shook his head in exasperation.
Robert, I'm disappointed in you.
Sir! Perhaps suddenly coming to his senses, Robert collected himself at those words and hurriedly corrected his posture. My father just stared at him with sad eyes.
Why did you prioritize your mother over Ashley in that situation? Well, you see.
Confronted by my father, Robert began to sweat. He could talk back to me, but he couldn't argue with my father.
A honeymoon is for the married couple. You could have easily gone on a trip with your mother some other time, couldn't you? Was it a lie when you said you would cherish Ashley? It wasn't a lie. I just wanted to cherish my mother too.
My father glared at Robert for the first time when he shouted that on reflex.
Even if it meant hurting Ashley?
Robert fell silent.
I am sorry.
He apologized in a trembling voice. However, his clenched fists were screaming of humiliation. It felt like he was apologizing simply because he had to. Surely, he didn't think he had done a single thing wrong in this situation. He was only apologizing because my father, the CEO, was angry.
Robert, you're good at your job.
At my father's words, Robert raised his head, thinking he might have been forgiven, but he quickly realized his mistake. A gaze colder than a frozen lake in the dead of winter pierced through him.
But no matter how good you are at your job, I can't trust someone who doesn't value his partner.
Robert began to tremble as my father held out a pen to him.
Please wait. Anything but divorce. I'll mend my ways.
As Robert adamantly refused to take the pen, my father forced it into his hand.
I'm not the one you should be apologizing to.
Seeing my father like that, Robert started clinging to me instead.
Ashley, please say something to her. I'm begging you. Spare me the divorce.
He came to my feet as if running away from my father, clung to my legs, and looked up at me.
From now on, I'll properly prioritize you, Ashley.
I couldn't even muster tears anymore. Between the lines, I could see glimpses of his disdain for me.
Please. If you divorce me, I won't be able to pay back my debts.
Seeing that neither my father nor I would ever nod in agreement, Robert shouted as if by accident.
Debts? What's that about?
As I looked down at his disheveled head and repeated the word I had heard for the first time, Robert let go of my legs in surprise. He must have really blurted it out by mistake. He covered his mouth as if to say, "Oh no."
Well, you see.
When my father and I communicated with just our eyes, telling him to spill everything, Robert finally began to talk as if he had given up.
Actually,
the truth he told us reluctantly was enough to make both my father and me hold our heads in our hands. Apparently, Robert and Stephanie had been living it up, firmly believing that Robert would become the CEO. The reason he had been going back to his mother's house almost every week was because he had been squandering money with his mother.
There's even less reason to keep him as your husband now.
My father was too flabbergasted to say anything and just expressed his contempt, but Robert finally showed a sincere apology.
Please wait. If you divorce me, what am I supposed to do starting tomorrow?
The way he apologized over and over again was comical, like a toy I had seen somewhere before.
That has nothing to do with us.
I sent him a dry look and waited silently for Robert to sign the divorce papers. There was nothing more to talk about, so my father and I quietly sipped our coffee. Of course, there was none for Robert. And so, although we made him sign the divorce papers half by force, the divorce went through without a hitch. The lawyer my father hired was extremely competent, and since I had kept a detailed diary, the negotiations seemed to go quite smoothly. When we demanded compensation, including the cost of the honeymoon that we had canceled and not gone on, apparently there was a request through the lawyer to reduce the amount. My father said he had refused before I could even answer, which made me laugh despite myself. As for Robert, as soon as the news of the divorce spread at the company, he must have felt uncomfortable and quit right away. With his meager savings and the small amount of severance pay he received from his voluntary resignation, he somehow managed to pay the compensation and his debts, but he seems to be forced to live quite frugally, according to the lawyer. And apparently, Stephanie took to her bed, and there was a call to a former colleague at the company asking to borrow money because she was living on part-time jobs. I'm not sure how much of it is true, but now it's become a topic of conversation and laughter at drinking parties. As for me, with the support of my father, who has finally decided to retire as CEO, and the other employees, it looks like I'll be taking over as the next CEO. Although I've been resisting, saying I don't really like being in the spotlight, I was persuaded by my father, who rarely shows weakness, saying he doesn't want to leave the company in the hands of someone untrustworthy. I thought I had to take responsibility for making my father feel that way, so at first I was a bit reluctant, but it seems I inherited my father's talent for management. With my father's support as chairman, our company's performance has been steadily improving, albeit slightly. Perhaps because of this, I've gained more confidence in myself, and I've been getting more invitations to parties where CEOs gather. I'm not thinking about a new relationship yet, but maybe it's time to take the next step forward.